Welcome back to Leveraging Leadership, where we unpack the art of business leadership. I'm your host, Emily Sander, Chief of Staff turned Executive Leadership Coach. This show is all about finding your points of greatest influence and leveraging them to better serve those around you. Marcelo Elliott Lopez, and he is the Chief of Staff and Head of HR for, let me see if I can do this, Tourangelle.
That is correct. Well
close. Okay. Yeah. The company name. Everyone in France is turning this off, but stay tuned because Marcelo's got some amazing information to share. So, Marcelo, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Can you just give us a quick background of where you've come from, how you got to be Chief of Staff?
Sure. Well, my background's in staffing, talent acquisition, staffing management, and HR consulting. And I have been HR manager, HR director at different companies. I was an HR director here. And with the size and scope of the company here, there was a need for change management and some of the other project management and kind of, the principal, the CEO, needing somebody to help share the way to pushing the vision forward. And so that's when we had the Chief of Staff, Head of HR role here at Tourangelle.
Okay. And just for quick context, what does your company do?
We are an artisan producer of quality, organic, and specialty cooking oils. So if you've been to Whole Foods or Williams-Sonoma or a bunch of other great retailers out there, then you've probably seen our oils in beautiful tin cans and French crafted and all that good stuff.
Oh my gosh. Okay. I definitely have to check that out. We have a local oil and vinegar shop here, and they have what seems like really good stuff. I got this, it was leek olive oil. Yeah. And so it's used with leeks, and we use it on salads and stuff like that. So yeah.
We have organic olive oil. We have, regenerative olive oil. We have 4 different great olive oils that even the New York Times has said are on the top 4 for quality in the U.S. Yeah.
Okay. And it sounds like you've got some pretty good distributors there, so people can pick up your oil. Okay. So, Chief of Staff and HR professionals, CHROs, often get confused sometimes, and there's often some overlap. And it's interesting that you have a dual role. So, can you talk a little bit about the thought process of making that a dual role? Was that your idea? Was that your principal's proposal? How did that come about?
Oh, that's a good question. I think it happened organically in terms of the work that was being done. I think the question was, is head of HR or director of HR correct title and job description for what I'm doing? Did the horse before the wagon before the horse? So yes, I think it happens, at least in my experience, it happened kind of organically through the projects we were working together. And then we realized there needed to be a change, and this company's not big enough for a CHRO, and my position wouldn't be truly reflected in a CHRO. But what did make sense is that Chief of Staff, somebody who works with all the different members, in the departments my principal oversees.
Right.
So that made sense. And then on top of that, I still manage all of HR, so I still oversee all of that. And there's a benefit to having, at least for me, and I think for a lot of others that I've spoken to that have similar positions, there's a benefit to having this dual nature position where you can leverage the potency of each position towards the company's objectives and goals.
What are some of those benefits? So, when I was Chief of Staff, I was essentially an HR generalist and was kind of the frontline HR. And then if it got into anything more specific or more nuanced or complex, we had an outside third party that I could go to. But I was the first one people would go to. Yeah. So I kind of have a notion of being Chief of Staff in HR. It sounds like yours is much more official and robust. But what are some of the benefits of having that combined role?
I want to go back to what you said. You said you were a HR business partner, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So that is my background. And I feel that, as an HR business partner, we used to be outsourced as HR business partners from third parties. We used to work for consulting companies that worked with those companies. And so essentially what you're doing is you're doing performance-driven HR, where you're linking some of the initiatives of HR towards a specific goal for the company. And, I kind of got my whole, I bit my teeth into HR that way. So I never knew the difference between HR as administrative and HR as consultative, performance driven. And because of that, when I approach HR, that's kind of how I've always seen it. And now you have people ops, and you have internal HR business partners, and you have change management professionals, and of course, chief of staff. I think I don't know if it's a spectrum, but I think there is a correlation to how that is driving within the industry, within HR as a sector. And I think for me, when you think about the streamlined communication that you can have, or when you think about, how you can kind of align the company's HR to strategic goals, that chief of staff, head of HR makes sense. When you think of like maybe more of a holistic approach where you're taking into consideration the employees, but then also not forgetting the strategic objectives of the company, that's where you might have a benefit in these two roles together.
Yeah.
And I think resource, for companies my size, it's a small company. We have limited resources. I think there's a benefit to merging the roles, because you could save time and maybe effort to move that in the direction that makes the most sense for the company and the people.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of things that help. When you look at where HR is going as a field with the advancement of AI coming into taking on and helping us support the administrative functions, taking that off our plate and allowing us to coach, to mentor, to do those strategic things. I think that is just a sign of where, at least my role, I think it's special for me that chief of staff HR, but I think the field itself is turning into how does HR become a player at every level, big company, small company, in the strategic planning and execution of company objectives.
I love that approach. And I think that's where you see HR functions and departments really add so much value. They're not, I hesitate to say like just kind of doing the performance reviews and like
Yes.
the resume reviews, and like all of those things are important too, don't get me wrong. But I think you're talking about that and so much more at a higher level.
Me too.
So thank you for noting that. And then you kind of brought it up there, but in terms of AI, where are you seeing, I mean, everything's changing so quickly, but right now, what are you seeing in terms of here's how our company leverages AI to our advantage, or here's how I'm seeing some other people in HR do it? Maybe they're a different company size or a different industry. What are some of the things that you're seeing there?
It's funny. When I was at Cornell, we had the CHRO of IBM come in, Nicole, and she came in and she spoke about what AI is doing in HR. If anyone could speak about it, it's her, because right now, with Watson and with the advancement of what they've done in their HR department, I think she just came out with an article today or yesterday on this. But AI agents and how that is helping eliminate, or not eliminate, excuse me, let me change that word, take off the plate of some of the things that we do that are remedial and repetitive. Those questions about what policies are for time off, or those questions about what it means in this state, for specific policies or guidelines of governance, whether it's state, federal, what have you. These things, we can all become experts at it, but if we have a system that helps us do that and manage it, what we can be is more effective in the interaction, the transaction part. A lot of times those transactions lose some of the qualities of connection because we're so busy trying to figure out what is the right answer that we lose the human touch. Now, if I can have the right answer on cue in a difficult situation, in a multifaceted variables, that and rely on this agent to supply that for me, I can be a much better HR partner, HR business partner, supporter, what have you. And your team can do the same thing. And I think that's where AI is going. It's how can we leverage? We need to stop looking at AI as, sometimes I have people that talk to me and they say, what's happening in HR? What's happening in manufacturing or food? And then what's happening in AI? Well, no, it's not. It's not a separate thing. AI is a tool that goes into every one of those things. So when people ask me what's going on with AI, I think, well, it's developing into a tool and a service, and you need to integrate it both into your data analytics for sure. We talked about performance management and doing all those things that HR typically does. Well, sometimes you don't have the resources or the time to pull that data that you already have and analyze it in a way that can give you back something that will move actionable items forward, whether it's HR initiatives that are tied to some of the important things that a department or a section of the company wants. That's what AI can do for you. And you need to, there's no one AI solution. I think we're all going to have some of our favorites. I already use 3 or 4 different AI services, some to help me create SOPs, some to take notes with meetings, some to understand data. But I did my senior thesis at UC Davis on the impact of AI in the staffing industry.
Oh,
Under
okay.
Professor Beamish and Professor Kyle, both great professors in sociology, organizational studies. But yeah, I think that it's interesting to see, 10 years ago, whatever, how many years ago, the impact that it had then and what we thought was going to happen and what's happening now. And I'm excited that AI is going to help us become better supporters of all the team members we have.
Yes, I love that. And it's funny, like in 10 years, we're going to look back at this and be
Yeah.
like, oh my gosh,
Perfect.
look at where we were, type of thing. But so much of what you said resonated with me, especially that state by state piece, because I remember
Yeah.
having to look up employee law like state by state because it's different and you don't want to
Yes.
get it wrong,
Yep.
especially if you're talking about something important like a potential termination.
Yep.
And so I would spend time and I would make sure I didn't want to get it wrong. So I'd make sure I had my information accurate. But that could take, hours
Yep.
in total, and that took me away from other things, but it had to be done right. And so and things like PTO policies, I would get those questions on repeat, and I would literally have like a copy paste
Yeah.
thing that I would like
That's the
send to
same.
people because the answer didn't change. I might tweak it based on their message to me, but I think what I'm hearing is like those certain types of rote pieces of information where, hey, someone has a question, it's a valid question, but
Yeah.
I can easily generate this answer using AI, where I as a human can be involved in some of these higher level conversations where it just makes more sense, and AI can't do that. It has to be a human to human connection, and you're spending your time there.
Agreed. Yeah, that's
Okay.
where I see it going.
Okay. And then practically speaking, how do you split your time between, I mean, do you even see it as kind of split time between chief of staff type activities and HR? Or are you just like, this is all blended in my approach and how this company views this type of role?
It's a good question. I think that I wouldn't say they're split roles. I don't walk into a place and go, I'm HR right now, but I do in a situation tell myself very cognitively, I say, I'm taking off my chief of staff hat, I'm putting on my HR hat, or vice versa. Because there's situations that call for different things. And sometimes the situation, can be calling for maybe a little bit of step back where I put on my HR hat first, right? And then I know that I'm going to have to follow up as some of the objectives of chief of staff. And so you play that according to how well you can manage, either it's kind of like code switching, right? Manage what you just said about depending on what the message they're bringing to you, what do they need? What does the person that's in front of you need to hear at the moment? And then what is the follow up and what communication and what support needs to happen after that? And sometimes that may be the HR hat in the beginning, the chief of staff later. I think there's a mix there, and I think every company and every person needs to find that balance themselves.
I'm curious where you come down on, is there ever, how do I phrase this, like a disadvantage, or is there ever a point where you can tell people are a little bit uncomfortable, like, is the HR hat, is he chief of staff hat? I had like a very select handful of these instances where I could tell someone was like, am I talking to her as chief of staff over here, or is this like an HR conversation?
That's a good question. I think that there's a group of people that you work with, like my peers happen to be the leadership or the executive team.
Yes. Yep.
And so that should always be a place of comfort, a place of safety, of communication, and I think I supply that to those folks. And I think at every level, HR needs to be open to hearing and giving space for folks to feel comfortable and able to communicate what they want. But yes, there are times when that what I afford to my peers and my executive team, no, I don't do that across the board to every part of every level of the company. You just
Yeah.
can't. I mean, you need to be effective with your time and your responsibilities. So, if
Mhm.
I hope that answered it. I tried to
It
answer
did,
that for a
it
second.
did. No, it's a tricky question, but I think that if people are hearing this, that might be a question that comes up in their mind. So, I
Yeah,
mean, I just wanted to acknowledge for me and my experience, that did come up, and it was something that at certain points I definitely had to be cognizant of, but overall, it was completely fine, and,
yeah.
people just knew knew what function I was carrying out, and sometimes it was blended, sometimes it had more emphasis over here, over there, and people just got it.
I will
Um,
say this: that as I came on board, I was brought on by a headhunter and came in just as a consultant to do some talent management stuff. And then I ended up saying, but when that happened, HR had a different. The culture of HR was different when I arrived. It was very HR is HR, and I think that as I'm kind of going back to your question, you have to change the dynamic of what HR is for the company to understand it, and everyone to understand that HR is not about HR, and it's not this separate thing. The company's objectives, the company's goals, the company itself, that is all part of it. And so I think if folks know where you're coming from and what your values are, and my values are aligned with the core of the community here, our employees, building our talent base, building our company. And I think if they see that, they understand where you're coming from. And there's no, now I don't see that question. So it's funny when you said that, I thought, oh, that reminds me like 4 years ago when people were like, our HR this. Now everybody has that mentality of, you know, everything we do, whether it's HR, receiving, planning, what have you, accounting, we're all focused on the company and moving it forward.
Yes. So in terms of talent, chief of staff and HR, like in terms of talent management, how do you, what's your overall approach to that in connecting overall talent management to like the strategic goals of the company and the long-term goals of the company?
Yeah. No, I think that's a good point. I think that, that's another benefit of being the chief of staff and coming with a talent background and being head of HR is that you have that ability now to leverage one thing for the benefit of the other. What one thing is understanding maybe the objectives and the strategic goals of the company more, and then using that knowledge and that understanding to better position a development within the company. So talent management shouldn't just be new talent coming in. It should be the
Right.
development of the talent you have now, understanding that not everyone's going to stay, and that's okay, and that's a good thing. We like being a platform for growth for individuals. If you're here, 4 years and you need to move on because you've hit the ceiling with us, more power to you, and you'll always be part of the company. We have a lot of folks that have done that. But for those folks that we do have tracks for, or maybe we have a longer runway, um, having the knowledge on the maybe the executive side or the chief of staff side that that can inform what you do on the HR side to help retain those folks, give them that growth. In the same vein, attrition is important as well, and so knowing when and where you have to restructure, and change, and doing that in the best way for everyone.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about your interactions with the executive team, with maybe directors, managers, kind of different folks across the organization? What does that look like on a day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month basis?
For us, it's been core to our growth. I think over the last, yeah, I've been with the company a little over 4.5 years, and one of the core things that we've done is, we had daily meetings and some weekly meetings scattered throughout the company, ops team and sales team, and what have you. I think it took a while to build, and that's what we did. You know, we built that core leadership team, that executive team as well. And that looks like, you know, a biweekly, for us at least. It once was a weekly touch point meeting, but it's a biweekly meeting now that we have with the CEO and with directors and myself and others. And then we have our quarterlies. We have, you know, retreats as well, leadership retreats. We have town halls with everybody. Communication is one of the most important. I mean, everyone knows this, I hope. And it's not just about communication; it's about effective communication that reaches the people on the level that they want. And so you have to have different forms of it with different levels, and it has to be with everybody, and it has to be sometimes, you know. And it has to be ongoing and regular, and you got to put in the work. You have those uncomfortable moments to build a team that's comfortable enough to be honest with each other and to know how to reach out for support. And it took several years, but I think at this point, those weekly, bi-weekly, and even quarterly meetings have made the most impact for us.
And I know that I've worked with chiefs of staff and executives who they have a chief of staff and a separate CHRO, and it's often like, who does this communication? Who does this communication come from? This all hands, or, you know, this division or this department. It could, you know, easily come from one or the other and make sense, but it's just kind of, how do we get our talk tracks and messaging aligned? And so I think one of the benefits of having this in one person or one function is you send it out from, you know, from Marcelo or from the office of the chief of staff or head of HR. So,
For us,
and
it's
again,
people team.
At what?
People team.
People team. Yes, thank you. And then over the 4 years, can you just talk about some of the types of projects and initiatives you worked on, or even what's coming up for you, what you're excited about in the next, you know, 12, 18 months?
Sure. You know, what we're working on now is actually we have two locations. We have one artisan mill that is an expansion of what we have here at the warehouse. And there we have like a molecular distillation tower, and we have about 13,000 olive trees, and we have the roasting and the pressing of oils. And we have an initiative to kind of bring the two teams together, standardize a lot of the processes that we have in one place with the other, bringing some of the compliance up to a certain level, changing with talent. We actually did a restructure and change the scheduling and kind of the shifts that we have. So we have a 24-hour shift on that side, which we don't have over here. And that calls for a lot of change in communication and management. And, you know, we moved some of the food grade processes we have here that do different things into this other area. And so we're working with quality assurance and engineering and production to make sure that we supply the right training, the right structure and support mechanisms for the team to bring forth what we want, which is kind of that a new step in our company's production of oil. And so it's an exciting time for us.
Interesting. And then you have two locations or groups, US and in France?
Yes, we do.
Okay, gotcha. And then throughout all of this, everything you've talked about and kind of past initiatives, future initiatives, HR, strategic objectives.
And we have Peru too, sorry.
Oh, Peru. Okay, you're going global here.
Yeah.
So in all of this, all around the world, how do you talk about continuous improvement? So how do you espouse, like, we want this company to grow and learn and thrive together, but that just doesn't happen by itself. There has to be a culture of it, and leadership leads the way on those types of things. And obviously grassroots, people taking action at all levels of the business is helpful there. But how do you go about motivating people or making that part of the culture?
I like the grassroots thing because for me, that's all about empowering folks at every level to take ownership and take initiative and kind of be part of the change. You know, we moved into lean manufacturing several years ago. But right now, what we have are like these ad hoc committees, whether it's for safety or sustainability or for quality assurance at different places. You have teams of people coming from different parts of the company that come together and work together to create these initiatives and to move things forward. 3 years ago we didn't have social sustainability program, and now we do, and now we monitor the waste and the recycling and the what can we upcycle and all those great things. And we find external partners that we work with, both locally, and we like to work, whether it's our staffing company, our sustainability partners. We like to work with companies that share our values, and so we have some minority-owned companies, some companies that are not only local but have some of the same sustainability values that we have. If you know anything about La Tourangelle, we have sustainable packaging. We have sustainable processes in some of our oil and food making, and so that's important. And you have to allow the folks that work for you to take that and build that into their own identity and their own value system, which they do. And you do that by empowering them to make change within the organization, giving them the possibility to make an impact in different ways that go beyond just their job description. And recognition, of course, I think the most important that often gets overlooked.
How do you do that? So, for instance, we had a program where there was like Slack channels and different ways you could submit an idea.
Yeah,
And it didn't matter what team you were on. You could submit, if you were in product and you had an idea for a marketing campaign, you could submit that. If you were an accountant and had an idea for an internal process that could be better, you could submit that. And we would go through these and talk to people about, their idea. And that was very popular and people engaged in that way.
yeah,
So what you said kind of reminded me of that initiative we had. So I'm wondering if
yeah,
you have any examples of like practically how do you do that?
yeah. I can tell you how we did it, and then it didn't work. We were put a
Sure.
suggestion
Do.
box there, say, hey, everyone, say a comment, and you want those comments. But what you really have to do is ask folks how they want to communicate and listen to what they say, and then give them other options as well. So whether you're in the town hall and you open it up for some folks that are extroverts, or
Right.
whether you come in and you have one-on-one meetings, or you take the feedback that they're giving both in a mid-year review or an annual review, or the suggestion box, which we still have. We also have online and phone methods of giving feedback. So you can do anonymous feedback, you can do non-anonymous feedback. We have multiple streams of this, both on digital platforms, physical platforms that are private, that aren't in areas like the break room, and then you challenge and you develop people to get into spaces where they can give their opinions. And then sometimes we do a little training on what the difference between an introvert and expert is, and how you need to sometimes go around the table and ask everyone to share and give everyone, everyone give me 3 minutes of what you think. And then you find that a lot of those folks that don't typically talk have great ideas that can help their departments or help others. And once that ball starts rolling, that's when it really starts to start, I guess what you would call it, infectious. It becomes, people start to want to share.
Yeah.
And so I think now, whereas 3 years ago we had a culture where people, once they shared, they were already aggravated. I think now when people share, they feel comfortable to either say what they want to say or share ideas and things. And this, while I'm speaking about where I'm sitting right now, the production area, we're still working a lot of this at the other location.
Yes. I mean, there's so much good stuff in what you said. It's so funny. At our town halls, we would do the same thing. We had like a Q&A session where people could ask any question they wanted of leadership. And some of our leadership team members were like, okay, because
Yeah.
people could throw some zingers out there and you'd have to answer in front of everyone. But that was good. And then you could tell certain people liked asking questions in front
Yes.
of people and or were comfortable. And some people just would never ask a question in that forum.
But
And
they
so
have a
we
question.
Yes, exactly. So I just like, hey, here's an anonymous form to fill out if you have a question that you want asked at the town hall. And we got a lot of questions that way, which I don't think we ever would have gotten if we just said, here's the microphone,
Yeah.
stand up in front of the whole
No.
company and ask your question. So I love that you said, the sentiment of meet people where they're at and understand people will feel comfortable in different settings and forums. I think that's so, so important because
Yeah.
if you're like, everyone communicates like me, so I'm going to set this up where I'd feel comfortable, you might be missing out on half of your company's feedback.
Yeah. And that's a great point, because when you have these ad hoc committees where you have smaller groups, sometimes people automatically feel more inclined to share. But really, what you have to do with any group that you start is be there in the beginning, not to set up the group or to set the structure or you want to help set the tone for a place where everyone feels comfortable. So,
Yeah.
we talk about icebreakers, we talk about people, having time just to have some camaraderie, become acquaintances, then friends. By the time they're in that, 3 month, 4 month of an ad hoc committee, that's when you start to get folks that feel comfortable enough to share really what they feel, what they think. And so these ad hoc committees, we'll start them, we'll invest in them for, a year. And the fruits of that labor really start to pay off when you stick to the process and stick to, giving people that space.
Yes, and it's long term because you
Yeah.
don't just automatically trust people, or at least
Yeah.
many people don't automatically just trust the other person, and so it does take time, but the dividends that you reap from that investment
Yeah.
are so high, and they're just continuous. Another thing that you highlighted, which is really important, is um, some people are very spontaneous. Like you ask them a question and they can think on their feet and answer, but some people like to think about it.
Yes.
So it's like sometimes it was, let me give these questions out in advance and say, hey, for next Thursday's meeting, here's the opening round of questions or how we're going to kick things off. Now, some questions are just meant to be spontaneous. I don't want you to think about it very hard. So I'll ask those on the fly. But a lot of people, I think, don't feel comfortable with like, I'm going to go into this thing. I know they're going to ask me questions and I don't like that.
Yeah.
So again, that's just another version of making everyone feel comfortable.
And it's an important part of it too. Yeah, giving people the opportunity to give that feedback in the way they want, for sure.
Yeah, for sure. If you were talking to someone, a chief of staff, head of people, an executive who's thinking about how to set up this kind of people operations or chief of staff role at their company, what advice would you have in terms of a blended role or other ways to set that up?
Well, that's a good question. I think I would ask them to think about why they want that. What is it about your current situation or the variables of the team you have that lead you to kind of lead with this? It shouldn't be, hey, I hear this works for La Tourangelle and it's great, and it is, so it's going to work for me. It should be, um, what structure do I have? What talent really do I have? I think
Mhm.
this requires the kind of intellectual intelligence and kind of the background, and which a lot of folks have. But then it's not just that; it's the structure of the company.
Yeah.
So, I am in this position because the structure of the company and the needs of the organization make it so. And so, if that's the case for you, then move forward with it. And it's more likely that you might see this in a small to mid-sized company, um, because of the structure and because of that overlap. And you see that in a lot of other positions as well, the hybrid positions. Now, you can have some hybrid positions in very large organizations, especially when those organizations are divided up in such a way that you have some regions that can help. I think I'm getting a little beyond the question there, but the most important thing to say is that it's not one size fits all, and it is an option. And learn more about what talent you have and what they want. I think it's important to know what your HR person wants, or what your talent manager wants, or what the chief of staff wants, and what the company needs.
Exactly. I think the two main points I would highlight there are ask yourself, what are you trying to achieve? Like, don't just
Exactly.
bolt this thing in there just because Marcelo said so.
Yeah.
But also know it's an option. Like some
Yes.
people might not have ever, oh, that can be a combined blended role.
Yeah.
That's perfect for us. So just know it's an option and it can be a very effective one.
Also,
So excellent. So Marcelo, anything else on, we've covered a lot of topics here on chief of staff, on people ops, on growing a company, on oil, anything you want people to know.
Um, no, I think that there's. I think you said it best right there. Is that there's an option that chief of staff is a dynamic role, and it's not what I like about it. It's not a one size fits all role. It comes in many different shapes and forms, and each of those shapes and forms have their own benefits and can fit. There's probably a version of it that works best for your company, but somebody that drives and helps drive change with the company, and that can make considerations for the principal and for the teams that they support, I think is going to be valuable in any organization.
My last question: when someone picks up one of your products, what is your favorite product? What's your most popular recommendation?
Oh man, so many, but our olive oil is by far the best out there. Olive oils, really. But we just came out with a California olive oil, which is
Ooh.
incredible. I mean, it's beautiful. I think I have a bottle over there. Um, but yeah, I love the olive oils. The pistachio oil is one of my favorites. I eat it
Ooh.
with my ice cream.
I have never heard of that. I have to
Oh,
try this.
so
Pistachio olive
I was
oil.
at a lavender event, a lavender run. We were, running through lavender fields, and it was you know, uh, uh, an event where we were raising funds for an organization. But they had lavender ice cream, and we had our different oils. And somebody came up and said, "Can I have some of that pistachio oil?" I gave it to them. They poured it on top of their ice cream, and then lines of people just started eating this. And so I
Oh,
got some, and it was delicious. But it's even better with coffee ice cream. So
whoa.
yeah, it's a game changer.
It is a game changer. Okay. No, thank you for that. Okay, I'm gonna have to pick that up. So we'll put a link for sure to your products that you recommended in the show notes. But
Really good.
Marcelo, thank you so much for being on. I loved our conversation, and I think it is good for people to know this is an option and to hear straight from you about how it's worked for you and your company. So thank you.
Thank you for having me.
If you enjoyed today's episode, please like, share, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.